Good evening and welcome to those of you who have been to one of our seminars before. Welcome back. My name is Megan Lyons and I'm a psychologist here at AI duPont Hospital. And for those of you who haven't been here before, those who have probably heard me say this before, that these seminars are one of the things that I love that I get to do because I end up getting to learn so much from my colleagues as well as from the families who come. So I'm really looking forward to this evening, I think both on a personal and professional level, given our topic tonight, and I can see from all of you who are here that this is an important topic to you as well, so welcome. Before I introduce our speakers, I just wanted to give you the lowdown on kind of how our evening's going to run, housekeeping things and stuff like that. We are going to start out with two brief presentations, one from each of our panelists who I'll be introducing in a couple of minutes. After the presentations, we'll take about a 5-minute break just so people can use the restroom and regroup and things like that. And then we'll come back and spend the rest of our time on question and answer. So I know some of you have submitted questions ahead of time online, and we'll get to as many of those as we can. I anticipate that a lot of your questions will get answered as we go tonight, and then more things will probably come up. So there'll be an opportunity for us to take questions from the audience. Something that you've probably already noticed is that we are recording tonight, so if you have a question you want to ask, you're not comfortable being on camera, you can write that down and give that to one of us, and we'll make sure that we get that to our speakers. So, without any further ado, I will introduce our first speaker. Dr. Vanessa Vigilante is one of my colleagues in the Behavioral Health Department here at AI duPont. Vanessa is a clinical psychologist and is also a clinical assistant professor of pediatrics at Jefferson Medical School. And she's been here with us at AI for 3 years, and prior to that was a clinical pediatric psychologist in the Department of Neonatology at the Children's Hospital of Philadelphia. There's lots more information to read about Dr. Vigilante, which you'll see in your program, but the thing that I just want to share is that her clinical interests include the impact of family processes on healthy psychosocial functioning, and so I think that makes her a really excellent panelist to speak to us this evening. And the title of her presentation is Self-Esteem, Biological, Cultural, and Social Dimensions. So while we bring up her presentation, please join me in welcoming Dr. Vigilante.
Welcome, everybody. It's good to be here, and I'm glad you're able to kind of find time in your schedule to join us for this talk this evening. I put a lot of cartoons because I know people like humor, kind of make it, interesting, as well as informative. So as I talk, you can kind of peruse these cartoons, and they sort of relate to the topics. What I want to do first is I want to ask if you can think back to when you were an adolescent or a child, and you had a disappointment. Let's say you were trying out for something, and you didn't make it. Can anybody relate to something like that? Okay. I want you to think back to that. And you weren't feeling too good about yourself, and you came home, and you told a parent or a caretaker, and their response was, well, try harder next time. Or, well, you know what, that wouldn't have been so fun anyway, let's try out for something else. Or stop being so upset about it and get over it, okay? Can people kind of relate to that a little bit? Parents are stressed out, kind of trying to divide their attention among everything. Now, I want you to think of the same situation. You had a setback. You didn't make a tryout for something. You come home, and you tell your parent, and they say something like, wow, that's really unfortunate. Same thing happened to me when I was your age. In fact, something like that has happened to everybody at least once. And you know what? Things like that are probably going to happen again. It's kind of a fact of life to kind of not have everything work out the way we want it to. So do you see the difference between those two things if you were that child, how you would feel with the first and the second? Do people kind of feel that? Okay. That's where our talk is going to lead, okay? It's going to lead into the feeling that gave you. It's called compassion or self-compassion, and that's where we're going to lead today, okay? In order to talk about self-esteem, we need to just look at how individual and cultural differences would impact it, just so you can kind of have that as a framework. So there are some of us who are very sensitive and take a lot to heart very easily, okay? And when those of us who are like that fall short, we tend to experience negativity and self-doubt and self-criticism not only more intensely but more frequently than our more laid-back counterparts, or those people who can kind of experience something and then brush it off and move on. One is not right and one is not wrong. It's just due to our disposition and our level of sensitivity, okay? And I want you to keep that in mind as we go through the talk. The other thing I want you to keep in mind regarding self-esteem are cultural differences. In our culture here in North America, we believe that personal effort is the reason for our success in life. The majority of us will say it's due to personal effort rather than due to external circumstances, okay? Or external things are stopping us from achieving. We typically think here, try hard enough and you'll succeed, which makes it very easy for us then, if we don't succeed in an area, to blame ourselves, okay? So just want you to keep those two things in mind, that there are individual and cultural factors that are part of how we feel about ourselves, okay? Self-esteem, it's like a calculation, okay? Here's where I think I should be. Here's where I am. It's this difference and the gap and the length of that gap that really creates high or low self-esteem. Self-esteem is about comparing ourselves to our own internal standard. Am I talented enough? Am I pretty enough? Am I smart enough? Am I popular enough? Am I athletic enough? We compare it to our own internal standard, and also we compare ourselves to those around us, okay? Let's take this cartoon, okay? So let's say before this fish here got this accessory, right? They were the only two little fish in a sea of sharks, okay? Self-esteem gonna be high or low based on what we just talked about? Low, okay? Now, this little fish here, he's got his accessory. Now, he's not with the big guys, all right? So his evaluation, according to external, how I measure up, he's gotten up here. This little guy is now all alone, kind of down here. Do you see the comparison and how self-esteem, that's what determines it, okay? So low self-esteem comes from this sense of the individual, I'm flawed in terms of my goodness. Because remember, we think of goodness in terms of, and it's true, how academically talented we are, how athletically talented we are, how physically attractive we are. These are all signs of goodness in terms of our society. And so this is what children, individuals, adults, everyone has to struggle with. So self-esteem is all about comparing ourselves to others and to the standard we feel we should meet and either have in some areas or have not, okay? Low self-esteem is, I do not measure up. High self-esteem is, I measure up well. So take a minute here. What does it look like? When you have low self-esteem, okay, it's actually manifested in these behaviors, okay? Children, adolescents, adults, everyone will exhibit these behaviors here because they feel they have not measured up to an internal or external standard, okay? High self-esteem means that look how stable this person is. It's right, there's chaos out here. They're solid, okay? They may not have measured up to a standard, they still feel good about themselves, and that's possible, okay? So despite the slings and hours of life, despite whatever happens, there's emotional and behavioral stability, okay? want you to keep all this in mind as we move forward and kind of hold it. Now we're going to talk about something that's going to be really surprising. Self-confidence. Different from self-esteem. Self-confidence is, I know how to do something, I can do it pretty well, okay? Do you know that you can have high self-confidence and low self-esteem? It's actually not unusual. You can be like, yeah, I'm pretty good at that. I'm a pretty good football player. I don't like myself anymore for it. Be aware of that. It's tricky, but it's true, okay? So check this out. We can have high self-esteem. We can have high self-esteem and not always measure up. That's the key here. That's the beauty of this. We will not always measure up, and that is okay. We can still feel good about ourselves. Because we will always, we have sort of this, as humans, as human beings, we have this automatic tendency to compare ourselves to internal, external standards. If we don't even try to do it, it just happens, it's automatic. You can bet that that will continue, and you can also bet that we will have times of not measuring up. We will have times of falling short, okay? So what is the thing then to work on here? Is it to try to never make mistakes and always measure up? Who thinks that that's the way to go? That's not possible. It's a natural thing to do to compare. It's going to be natural to fall short, okay? If in a classroom, everyone has an IQ of 100, one classroom, let me do a thought experiment. One classroom, everyone has an IQ of 100, which is a solid average. Another classroom, 25% have an IQ of 100, 25% high average, 25% low average, 25% genius. Which classroom will there be higher self-esteem in? The one where everyone is the same, or the one where there are some high, middle, and low? Where everyone's the same, why? Yeah, your standard is met, okay? That's not the way life is, okay? We need to accept that, okay? What's the key here? The work to do is not to raise your self-esteem by always trying to do better than the next person or do better than your standard. You can do that. Will it raise your self-esteem? There's no relationship. What you got to work on is being okay with not always measuring up. Okay, that's what the key is here. Okay? Who's with me that it's impossible for us to always measure up to an internal, external standard? Does everybody get that? If anyone disagrees, please. Everyone understand that. So we need to learn to be okay with that. And let's look at how to do that, okay? It's through self-compassion, actually based on neurological research with Buddhist monks, okay? We typically think this is about how much warmth do we have for ourselves. We think of warmth, we think of others. We think of being warm towards others. This is how much do we accept and are kind to ourselves when things go wrong, okay? Self-esteem based on self-evaluation and other comparison. Self-compassion based on self-acceptance of what's going on, okay? But it's not just having warmth for ourselves, it's having warmth when the road is rough. Instead of saying, well, that's unfair, right? That's comparison. That was unfortunate, what happened to me. That implies it happens to everybody, okay? It is a normal part of life that happened. Anyone could have made that mistake, okay? What it does is, we all have this internal critic. It causes depression, anxiety, withdrawal. The point of this is to move away from that internal critic and bring in self-compassion, okay? It's a three-step process to self-compassion. You accept that you are experiencing difficulty, okay? And rather than have the internal critic kind of pop up, rather than being self-critical about it, you respond to yourself with kindness and understanding. This is an unfortunate happening, okay? I'm sure other people have gone through the same thing. In that sense, it helps us to feel part and connected to others, not alienated from them. Comparison causes alienation and isolation. Accepting what is, being okay with not always measuring up, and still being happy, and is really correlated with contentment. Okay? The research on self-compassion, these are the outcomes here. Decreased symptomatology, okay? Increased coping ability, so when setbacks do happen, you don't end up feeling negative about yourself because of them, okay? And blaming yourself and thinking like the world is over now, I made a mistake. Greater ability to bounce back after setbacks. And actually, people who have a lot of self-compassion quickly admit mistakes because they're not going to be real critical about themselves for it. So they're not really in this denial. I didn't do it. That wasn't my fault, right? Because they don't want to deal with, now I'm going to start, the inner critic's going to come. I can't deal with that. I don't want to feel that way. They kind of, okay, yeah, you know what? Because I can be okay with making a mistake. And now let me learn from it. So there's some references, some research studies that talk about self-compassion. And that's it. Deborah can take over.